Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us for our latest session in the IT 101 sessions for NASTD. My name is Brad Steele. I'm the Senior Director of Unified Communications at the Commonwealth of Massachusetts and the past president of NASTD. While I was president a couple of years ago, I was reading through the NASTD Constitution and guidelines, and something stood out to me in particular. Article 1 of the NASTD Constitution, Section 2, Purposes and Goals. The second goal stated is to engage in programs for the training, education, and development of technology professionals from all areas of state government. Having read that, I decided to put together a set of educational videos, what I've been calling IT 101 sessions, to help with this education. I ask industry leaders from our corporate partner community some standard questions about new or understood technologies, say that 3 times fast, or services that are offered. It's not meant to be a marketing solution. It's not meant to be, a peg-all for everything involved. It is just really just that basic education about something to at least get the conversations going and give you some better footing when you're getting into conversations about different technologies. We reached out to our corporate affiliate partners through a couple of different means, and glad to say that they have responded very strongly, and we've gotten lots of good information and lots of good sessions coming up. And this particular week, we are working on Zero Trust, which is something that, I've been told in my relationships in life that maybe I need to work on more, but I don't think that's what we have in mind today. I think this is more of a technological thing. So we've reached out to our corporate partner, Cisco, and they're going to be helping us lead the discussion on Zero Trust. So for this discussion, we have Seth Price. Seth Price from Cisco Systems is a business solutions architect. He has a strong background in public sector, working with both state and local government as a technology leader. His background also includes 10 plus years as a consultant. Now at Cisco, Seth is most focused on helping public sector leaders in their digital transformation efforts. Seth represents the business consulting arm of Cisco, and part of his work with public sector is helping customers define and execute a roadmap for success in the most critical areas of their business. On a personal note, Seth lives just south of Raleigh, North Carolina, so he and I are going to be neighbors sometime when I retire. He's there with his wife, Tracy. They enjoy traveling and spending time with their grandsons in Mobile, Alabama. And Seth is also an avid golfer, loves motorcycles, and something else we have in common, playing our guitars. So welcome, Seth.
Thank you, Brad. It's a pleasure being here. Thank you for the invitation.
Excellent. So, the conversation around Zero Trust is, one, again, you hear a lot about, we hear different statements regarding Zero Trust and things like that. But it's, it's kind of like the cloud discussion is everybody's definition, everybody's thoughts on it, on what it really is, and and what it's used for. It varies very differently. So hopefully we can get some good information around this. So why don't we start with just that basic question? So what is Zero Trust?
Great. Yeah, that's a great place to start. You know what, Brad? I like to talk about what Zero Trust is and what it isn't. I think those are 2 very important pieces of this conversation. And I love how you said it's very similar to cloud, right? Remember years ago, we heard this idea of cloud and we were told that we needed it, but we didn't know exactly what it was, right? I feel like we're still kind of in that same mode when it comes to Zero Trust. Everybody's telling us, all the analysts are telling us we need to do it, but what exactly is it? And let's start with that. Let's start with just kind of a high level overview of what Zero Trust is. But I'd like to start with a little history of where we have traditionally, or how the methods that we've traditionally used to secure our organizations our employees, our citizens, our data, right? Let's talk a little bit about that because I think that lays a good kind of foundation element for why we need zero trust, right? So let's look at traditionally, right? How have we secured our networks? You know, traditional methods, we were very focused on what you were trying to access and where you were trying to access it from, right? That's how we've usually built our security strategies. And we'd use things like VLANs, which most people are familiar with, or IP addresses. And based on that information, traditionally we built access controls that allow certain VLANs and certain IP address schemes to talk to one another with additional ability to restrict the type of communication between the devices, right? Or the end users. And then you look at, you know, firewalls have traditionally been used as well, right? For specific boundary elements, we provide additional control methods. We provide additional inspection, right? But when we look at that strategy, you know, I'm in this VLAN, I have this IP address. That means I can talk to these assets within my organization. There's some disadvantages to that strategy today. And let's talk about why. First of all, let's take a look at what's happened to our workforce. Our workforce has become extremely distributed. Now, back when I was in government, I always tell this joke. It was commonplace to say, if I don't see you in your seat, it means that you're not working, right? But that has changed. That has changed. Even in government, in state government, we're seeing an increase in the ability to work from home or really work from anywhere, right? And it has been noted that there are distinct advantages to allowing people to be able to do their function from home or from wherever they may be, right? This in itself has created the need for agility in how we perform our jobs, but with that agility becomes the need for tighter security controls. So with this new model of being able to kind of work from anywhere, it often results in less oversight and increased risk. That's kind of what we see with this distributed workforce model. So how do we know if somebody's working from anywhere that we can actually trust that remote user is who they say they are? That's one of the first challenges. Second, the old standard methodology for how we perform security, it doesn't work very well for how malicious attackers or devices are attacking our networks, right? If an attacker gains access to a device or multiple devices on our networks, they can easily traverse that network. And not only in the segment or the portion of the network where they were able to infiltrate, but they become very crafty in their methods and ability to hop between network segments and expose our institutions to even greater risks. Look at data centers. You know, data centers host our most critical applications, our most critical data. And our data centers have long used similar security strategies that we see in our enterprise networks. Yet we see time and time again government institutions being compromised by things such as ransomware. Now, if you were to look at the historical nature of, say, how ransomware does the most damage, if you look to see where it entered our networks, the majority of the time it's not through the data center, right? It's still the majority of the time we see things like phishing attacks. Phishing attacks where somebody opens up an email link, the end user device becomes infected, then that infection works its way through up into the data center where the majority of the harm can occur and where the biggest ransoms can be mandated or asked for, right? And then there's a third area that I'd like to focus on. We are seeing an explosion of what I call unmanaged devices, which would be things like IoT, right? These are great technologies. They offer a lot of value to our organizations. They offer a lot of value in the experience that we can provide to our citizens. Now, while these solutions and devices offer that incredible value, by nature, they shouldn't be blindly trusted. And there's some reasons why. We don't have things like patching firmware capabilities on those type of devices in similar ways that we do our enterprise network devices, right? That's why I refer to these type of devices oftentimes as unmanaged. We need a method to not only adopt these technologies because they bring tremendous value, but we need to do it in a way that limits the risk associated with adopting them. We need to make sure that they can't launch a full-scale attack on the rest of our network. That's very important to understand. So that brings us back to the question, what is zero trust? Well, it's a mind shift. It's a mind shift where by nature we don't trust any device, any end user, any asset that is making an access request on our network, right? To be allowed access to anything, everyone and everything must prove they are a trusted resource with allowed access to the application or the data that they're trying to access. So that being said, that's kind of a high level overview of the historical nature and methods that we've used for securing our networks and why we need zero trust. But let's talk real briefly about what zero trust isn't, because I think that's really important. Zero trust is not something you buy off the shelf and turn on and say, hey, I'm zero trust, good to go, right? I wish it was that simple, but it's not. Zero trust is a business and security strategy for protecting your organization and its most critical assets, which includes your employees, which includes your physical assets, which includes the citizens that you serve, and making sure that you're protecting them, their personal information, and their identity, right? It takes planning, it takes architectural design, it's a journey. Again, it's not something that you can simply turn on.
Okay. Yeah, and I know that what you were talking about early on there, the access control lists and the VLANs and those things, and especially with the expanding nature of government, those things become very cumbersome and very hard to manage, right? And hard to keep track of. So it actually opens yourself up while you are locking as much of the doors as you can. There's so many doors now that you might forget a window or a door on the other side of the house, so to speak, when you're talking about that. So zero trust seems to me like more than just locking the doors, but also checking what's coming through the doors, who's coming through the doors, that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Absolutely.
All right. So we know what it is, we know what it isn't. So why should states care about it? And how would we get started on the journey towards zero trust?
Great question. There's no doubt that our government institutions are under attack, right? We've known that, we see it. We see instances of political landscape changing, right? Like what's going on in our world today.
Yep.
And when nations support specific countries, they may become under attack and an elevated risk level from other nations, right? In fact, there was just in the last couple of weeks, based on what's going on in the world, our CISA organization and the FBI released information about elevated risk level to our nation's most critical infrastructure based on what's going on in the political landscape today, right? So those are things that we need to be aware of. So we know that there's an elevated risk level based on geopolitical type situations, but in general, our governments are under attack. So this is something that we need to be aware of and we need to start planning for. As the landscape changes, we need to have the agility in being able to keep up with the pace, right? The other thing that's interesting about government right now is that it's in the midst of a massive digital transformation. A lot of it was actually accelerated by COVID. Now we're at a point where citizens expect to be able to communicate and consume services from their government in a digital manner. That means we have more and more applications that live in our data centers and cloud providers. Some applications may have elements within multiple cloud providers and some additional elements in our on-premise data centers, right? So it's very complex how our applications work, but these are good things that are happening because it's offering a better citizen experience, right? But those applications contain our organization's most critical data. They contain our citizens' most critical data, oftentimes, right? And now they're consumed by a distributed workforce, internal workforce, citizens, vendors. So we have this complex environment with people accessing stuff from all over the place, right? We also, if you look at going back to critical infrastructure, there's this massive digitization that's happening in our critical infrastructure. Look at the digitization going on in our transportation roadways, right? Look at what's going on in utilities, right? There's this massive digitization effort, and it's become a strong focal point for hackers and nation state actors because they know if they can damage those specific areas, then they're really causing an opportunity for chaos within our environments. Now, I don't say these things to instill fear. That's the last thing that I want to do. What's happening, it's good. It's good stuff, right? Innovation that's going to benefit not only our organization, but us as citizens of our communities and this country. It's going to offer, a lot of value to us going forward. So these are good things that are happening, but we have to understand the risk associated when we start digitizing our environments more and more, right? But the other thing that we have to understand that as we do that, the risk increases. We just need to be aware of that as we're digitizing more and more in our environments. So allowing access based on old school methods, quite frankly, just doesn't work anymore, right? We have to keep up with the times. And as mentioned, zero trust is a methodology where we don't trust anyone or anything blindly. And that's key and that's vital to ensuring that we keep the integrity of our network and our applications exactly where they should be. Now, the second part of that question was, how do we get started? Well, if you haven't already, my first recommendation is start planning your journey, right? It's not, again, something you can just turn on and not something that you should take lightly, right? This takes planning, it takes architectural planning, it takes business strategy planning to make sure that you can do this in the most effective and efficient manner. A very good place to start is by mapping out your most critical assets and applications along with where you're the most vulnerable today. Focus on those areas first for your zero trust architecture, and then build upon from there would be my best recommendation.
So in looking at that, we have, like you had mentioned, we have lots of things in place. We have the firewalls and all these ACLs and all these other things. So as we're moving towards zero trust, is this just going to keep getting bigger, or are there things within our security footprint that we have today that this will replace, or is it just supplemental to what we have in place today?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Brad. Funny enough, a lot of government institutions already have in place some of the key components to a zero trust architecture. Think of something like multi-factor authentication, right? That by nature is a big part of a zero trust architecture. With multi-factor authentication, or MFA for short, we're not blindly allowing devices or people to access our applications based on old school access control methods like firewalls, right? No, we're making them prove their identity as being trusted, along with the ability to ensure they're making their request on a secure and trusted device. Both components are just as important as the other. But what I've seen, Brad, is I've seen organizations adopt multi-factor authentication and do a good job with it and say, hey, we're done, we're zero trust now. Man, I wish, again, it was that simple, but it's just not, because we've already identified all these different areas where people and things can access our network, right? Let's talk about that workforce again, which has become very distributed, as we've already mentioned. Old school methodology was to have everyone connect back to the corporate office using a VPN and firewall. It's not the most efficient way, right, to backhaul everyone back through a data center when folks could be working from anywhere, right? With applications living pretty much anywhere, look at SaaS applications, right? We've all adopted things like Office 365 and other things that are delivered to us in that SaaS type model. Those applications can live anywhere and at any time, and our workers are accessing them from anywhere. The old model doesn't solve our problem once they have access over VPN either, right? You bring someone in over VPN, they're dumped into those old security methodologies anyways, right? So we have to recognize that. So how can we implement a zero trust model for our workforce, giving them access to the resources they need in the most efficient manner, yet always ensuring they have good security posture in everything that they do? Well, this requires us to create a more distributed security model. We have a more distributed workforce. We needed a more distributed security model as well. And that's where zero trust is at the center of ensuring that our remote workers can do their job effectively, yet requiring, again, that they prove their trust when accessing any resources to ensure that they maintain good security posture. Now that's our distributed workforce. Let's go back into the office now. We've already identified how crafty attackers are in traversing our networks using those old methods. Again, we want to make sure that even internally, users and devices have to prove their trustworthiness on every connection they make, right? And that's key. In both instances, there's some technologies out there that a lot of folks have already adopted in parts of their organization that are part of the zero trust architecture. Think of things like identity services, right? Not MFA for applications, but identity services within a network architecture. That is a zero trust mechanism that mandates every user and every device must prove their trust on every connection they attempt to make. What this does is it dramatically increases our security posture while drastically reducing the damage if an attack does occur. Attackers in this method would not be able to traverse our networks in the way that they are today. And that's important to understand. And then just as important is to make sure that you have tools that when requests are made that are denied or are not meeting their requirements, that you have oversight, that you have insight into those attempts, insight into anomalous behavior on your network so you can quickly identify and mitigate any of those potential threats. The third aspect that I'll talk about is going back into the data center, which really has become this massive hybrid cloud, right? We all have things on-prem. We all have things in a cloud provider. Sometimes we have things in multiple cloud providers, right? Sure. These are the areas where our most critical applications and data reside. Those old school methods of access controls, they can't do what zero trust can do, right? They expose risk rather than limiting it. Not only that, Brad, but you mentioned something about keeping up with access lists, keeping up with firewall rules. It is a manually intensive process. I've been through it. I work with people that go through it. Go ahead, Brad.
And prone to mistakes, right? You're doing it manually. So you put in an access control list, you miss a segment, or you add in an additional segment that you didn't mean to by a /24 as opposed to a /25, vice versa. Lot of potential for manual error.
Absolutely. A lot of manually intensive, increases the risk for human error. And what I find, Brad, is look, our network and security folks, they're slammed with requests on a daily basis.
Absolutely.
Keeping up with things like access lists and firewall rules. I may add a firewall rule today that I mean to move tomorrow. I find quite often those firewall rules stay in there, right? Or access lists are not kept up to date just due to the manual nature for how they're managed. So how do we augment what we do today with a zero trust strategy to our data center and cloud environments? First and foremost, we need to understand how our applications talk to each other. It's time for us to understand that. I find most organizations, it's not just in government, it spans the gambit of organizations, Brad. They have no idea how their apps talk to each other. How can you secure your applications properly if you don't even know how they talk to each other, right? There are some great tools out there that can help you map your applications, which I think is a critical step. And then taking that knowledge and bringing more modern controls to who and what can access those critical systems and data. Again, everyone and everything must prove their trustworthiness. But again, it's not just about access controls. It's about that visibility and critical insight when access requests are made that shouldn't be allowed, if we're requiring trust on every connection, then we need to quickly be able to identify when a request or activity is present that we're not expecting, right? That's beyond the scope of normal activity. And the tools associated with this type of architecture should bring those elements front and center so we can quickly respond to any potential threats.
Okay. So notify us when we have too many hits on an application. Notify us when we have too many, what look like bad requests into a system, right?
Yeah, or think about this. Think about an IoT device, right? That's sitting out in the field. It should be very predictable the type of communication that sensor is going to make, right? It's going to collect data and it wants to send it to an application. What if that device starts blasting out across our network like a DDoS attack, right? Now, if we have zero trust properly implemented, we're most likely going to stop that. But what we want to know that that's occurring so that we can remediate that situation, maybe call the vendor, right? It's critical for us to have those type of insights as well.
All right. So, the next question, I think you've answered, pretty much, the base of this question. But when we talk about zero trust, are we talking about something that lives in the cloud or lives on premise, or is it kind of, omnipresent, so to speak? Is it everywhere?
That's another good question. Brad, I work with states all over the country, and the one consistency that I find is there's lots of inconsistency on what states will and will not do, right? Everybody has their own rules, regulations, legislation in place when it comes to cloud-based security tools. There's some states that just will not allow it today, right? And that's okay, right? My personal recommendation is to work with vendors that offer you flexibility when building a zero trust architecture, with options for both on-premise, if that's your choice, or cloud delivered, if that's your choice as well. Now, that being said, the value of cloud delivered tools as part of your zero trust model is they're easy to onboard and they offer less overhead in managing them long term, right? When we bring things on-prem, we now have to manage the servers involved, the software involved. We have to patch those things on a regular basis, right? So there is more manual effort involved. So there is an advantage to cloud delivered because they're just easier to work with and easier to onboard. However, if your organization doesn't allow cloud delivered or cloud managed security tools, then look for those that can offer you an option, right? That have the ability to, if you go on-prem today, offer you a roadmap to a cloud-based option once the rules and regulations within your organization may change. But for me, flexibility is the key with those that you work with.
So, it seems like I've been hearing about zero trust for a while now. Again, different levels of understanding over that time. What are some of the changes that have happened in this space in the last few years and anything more recent?
Yeah, so it's funny, zero trust, the concept has been around for years, right? But what has changed, I believe, is hackers and malicious actors have become very sophisticated, right? So what we're seeing now is that CISOs are putting this quickly up the priority list on their list of strategies. That being said, the major changes that I'm seeing today is a major focus from security vendors, right? Focusing not on point product solutions, but in overall zero trust architecture. For instance, like here at Cisco, we have a comprehensive zero trust architecture that aligns to the NIST model, right? And we can show you what that model looks like, where it aligns to NIST, and the different products involved and how they integrate with each other. The other major change in zero trust is it's turning security strategies upside down, right? People know they need to do this. They don't know exactly what it is or how to go about it. So it's causing disruption within security practices within organizations. and government institutions and others, they're looking for solutions on how they can best perform and traverse this journey, yet do it in the most effective and efficient manner. So I think that's my perspective, Brad, is I don't think there's been a lot of changes in the actual concept. It's just there's more focus and vendors are packaging up offerings to make an easier consumption model for organizations.
So I know you said this is not a flip of the switch. We can't just turn on zero trust. And you even alluded that it's kind of an ongoing journey and everything. But to get to that basic point where we can consider ourselves a zero trust environment, how long should that journey take?
Yeah, I wish there was a kind of a standard timeline, but it depends on the organization, right? But I'll give you some context because that's a really good question. Here at Cisco, we started our zero trust journey probably about a year and a half ago. And as you can imagine, we're a global company, about 75,000 full-time employees, plus a myriad of contractors across the globe as well. And I don't know how many applications we have at Cisco, but it's massive, right? It's absolutely massive. However, at this point, we have just about all of our applications and access methods are now part of a zero trust model. And I got to tell you, Brad, this has been a huge advantage. And the reason being is we talk about that distributed workforce. In my role at Cisco, I'm at home right now. This is my home base. I very rarely ever will go into an office. I'm either here at my home in North Carolina or I'm traveling, right? So it's not only important to me to have good security, it's important for me to have a consistent experience, right? No matter where I'm at. And that's key. I think that's really important. In my role, I can be working from anywhere. But the great thing is my security policy never changes based on where I'm accessing customer resources. So security postures are always maintained. And even better, my experience never changes. If I'm in an office, if I'm at home, if I'm at a Starbucks, if I'm in a hotel, if I'm at a Regis office, my experience in accessing my resources that I need access to never changes, right? And the security never changes. So I think that's really, really a key point of all of this. So yeah, it's taken us a while, but a company this massive to be where we are about a year and a half is really good, right? So that being said, I think the easiest place to start, Brad, is going back to multi-factor authentication. But don't stop there, right? In fact, if you haven't already, start building a comprehensive roadmap that includes your entire organization and all the different threat vectors across that landscape, right? Don't stop at MFA. It's a great place to start. It's probably the easiest way to start, but I just encourage folks, don't stop there. Work on what that entire architecture looks like across your entire organization.
Okay. And if folks needed a refresher on MFA, that was actually my last IT 101 session. So you can go back in the YouTube archive and pull that out. So what else do we need to know if we're going to be implementing zero trust?
Well, again, don't get discouraged. It's not something you're going to do overnight, but I think it's critical to first start identifying, mapping out what your most critical assets are, your most critical applications, what your most critical data is, and start with a strategy around those, right? This world is changing and we need to make sure the integrity of our systems are in place and always maintained. So start with those that are the most critical. Then, and I believe this is extremely important, look for vendors that can provide you an integrated security architecture for zero trust. And why do I say that? The reason that I say that is not because I would ever encourage anyone to put all of their eggs in a single vendor's basket.
Yep.
However, that being said, there are some distinct advantages for integrating your architecture strategically. With an integrated security architecture for zero trust, not only do you get all the tools, but you get greater control and visibility into your entire threat landscape with the ability to correlate data between the different tool sets, right? Because zero trust is not a single tool. It's a set of tools that builds a platform. So the ability to correlate data across that entire stack is extremely important. Just as important is that platform approach, because even though you want the security, you want to make sure that it's something that your team can actually manage, right? And with an integrated architecture that provides you integrated tools, it'll be easier for your teams to manage.
And I would assume that along with the applications, you would want to have a good list of who might need to access that application or that data.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's if you haven't done it already, it's going to entail some work, right? Mapping your applications and then mapping who is trusted to what, right? That's extremely important.
All right. So we've gotten the thought down. We decided we're going down the road. How much do we budget? What's the cost model? What's the cost model for Zero Trust?
So, many vendors out there are offering zero trust architectures and trying to make them simple from a consumption model, right? You'll see a lot of enterprise agreements in this space now, right? Just wrapped around zero trust. Get all the tools that we need at a cost that's more appealing, right? So that's an advantage that I'm seeing. But then some organizations prefer CapEx or OpEx, right? It depends on what your organization has a preference for to get access to all those tools that you need for your architectures. Then the other question is, do you want to manage it or do you want someone else to manage it, right? What is your workload and your staff's skill set look like today? Do you think that's something they can take on in addition to their current work? If not, there's a lot of vendors or consultants out there that will offer this as a managed solution as well. So do I want CapEx? Do I want OpEx? Do I want to manage it? Do I want someone else to manage it? Bottom line, look for a vendor that can meet the consumption model that your organization prefers the most, right? Not only that, but they can offer you the skill set needed to help you be successful. So that, I know, Brad, that's not putting an actual cost out there because there's so many variables, but those are the things that I would look for, right? Which vendors can meet the most appealing model that my organization wants to take on?
Okay. Yeah, very, very rarely is the answer to that question in these sessions, oh, it's $1. Yeah, we're not buying widgets, and that should be understandable. I mean, obviously,
Right.
a state that has a few thousand employees, is going to be different than, say, Massachusetts, who has 42,000, or California, God only knows how many they have. Obviously, that's going to be a different journey. But just knowing how we plan on that, so that's excellent. Thank you for that. So we're talking about this, and it's zero trust, and it is, obviously it's a security measure, right? But are there any other security concerns that we need to be aware of when we're implementing zero trust?
So I don't think, from my standpoint, the security concerns are any different than any other security strategy. And what I mean by that is, am I using the tools effectively, and where are my gaps? Right? That's part of every security strategy. I see way too often that organizations adopt tool sets and they don't use them, or they don't use them to the full capabilities, right? That's why I would encourage folks to get help in this regard. Because if you're going to make the investment and you're going to go on this journey, make sure that you're doing it in a way that's going to set your organization up for the most success, right? And close those gaps, right? So don't try to do this in a vacuum. Get people to help you out that you can trust. And it's extremely vital. And the reason why I say that, it's so vital to ensure that you're meeting the desired outcomes of what you want from going down this journey, right? Define what that is. Define what it is, right? What's my end state? What's my end goal from an outcome perspective? And make sure throughout the process that I'm meeting those objectives, right? Whether it be using internal employees or getting the help from others. Just make sure that you define what those things are. And then lean on those that have done it before, right? Look for those that have done it before. Ask them, 20 questions. What was it like? Where did you start? Where did you find the most difficulty? Did you use cloud-based? Did you use on-prem? Ask them those questions that are most important to your organization, and including those vendors that have done it before, have done it with multiple organizations, right? Look for people that you can trust to help you in this journey.
All right. Final question. So you're almost done with me. Final question that I ask, what else do we need to know? What am I forgetting to ask you? What else do we need to know when we're going on this journey?
Brad, when I think about this question, we've covered a lot of information up here, right? In this last little bit, we've covered a lot of information from a high level perspective. Don't get overwhelmed. That's what I would say. That my recommendation is, what else do you need to know? Try not to get overwhelmed. I know it sounds overwhelming. Don't get discouraged, right? The journey to zero trust, it's one that's worthwhile. Not only is it worthwhile, it's critical to protecting our organizations now, but also in the future. Again, the security, malicious actors don't just stop, right? They're crafty, and they're also always changing their methods. They also know the type of technologies that we're implementing in our organizations to protect ourselves, right? We need to be as agile as those attackers to ensure that we protect our organizations and the data of those that they serve, right? So this is critical. It's important. Try not to get overwhelmed. Just commit to getting started, right? Start there. Commit to getting started on your journey if you haven't already. And quite honestly, Brad, that's the best advice I could give you or anyone else.
Well, that ends the question and answer session. I think of security and trust, and I joked around earlier about my relationships, etc. But the security person who was in charge when I first came to state once told me that an application isn't secure if it works. and while he is factually correct, there are vulnerabilities and there are holes and everything. I think that every possible item that we can put in place to make it so that that application does in fact work and work to its best ability and to meet the constituent needs, as long as it's doing it in the most secure manner. So somewhere in the middle is a happy medium where the security risks are minimal, but the application still does work. So obviously, I think that gets us down that.
And I can't say this enough, Brad, is don't only be concerned about the security, be concerned about the experience, right? Because we can create security strategies, but if then nobody knows how to use anything anymore, or it changes based on where they're accessing things from, then it's not a really good experience, right? So keep those two things hand in hand. Maintaining good security posture, maintaining a good experience.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you again. So folks, that's Seth Price from Cisco Systems, Business Solutions Architect. And I'm Brad Steele from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. If you have further questions on this, you can reach out to me through the NASTD page, and I can get you in touch with Seth or other folks in this area. If you haven't seen the other videos that we put together, they're now accessible on the NASTD YouTube page. Like I said, there is one on multi-factor authentication that we did last month. So you just go to the NASTD website, and there is a link there over to the YouTube videos. So we ask you to join over there. And I thank you all for your time today. And hopefully this was as educational to you as it was to me. I'm finding these sessions to be really great. If nobody else watches them, at least I'm getting something out of it. So hopefully you're all enjoying them, watching them, and getting a good education. And thank you again, Seth.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you for the invite.
How long of a journey should that be?
Yeah, here, let me give you an example, and maybe this will help put it into context.
Seth, I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second, and I can edit this out. Remember I told you my dog would be able to?
You did.
So I will go back, and I'm going to just take my dog upstairs for 1 minute, and then I'll come back to how long to implement.